Sunil, good morning. Good to have you on the show. Thank you so much for taking the time out and joining in. Help us and analyze and assess what would be the impact for mutual funds having exposure to DHFL's debt.
No, I think the key is that there was a rating downgrade of their medium-term paper to BBB minus. So naturally, the impact on the FDs one is that fresh FD flow would have dried up. Second is there could also be pressure on the existing FD book instead of customers lining up for premature withdrawals. So I think what the company has done is a smart thing to protect their current situation, which is anyway they're not getting much money through FDs, but at least they can prevent the hemorrhaging on the existing FD book, because with the rating downgrade, customers might be kind of getting concerned and say, let me pull out my money. So the premature withdrawal, I think, is preventing that is probably the primary reason for this decision to not take fresh deposits or allow the withdrawal. So from a mutual fund perspective, I think that the key is, I think the main concern for the company, so far they have met all their maturing obligations. But over the next 2 months, I think there's a substantial amount of around 10,000 crores till September, which is due for payment. And I think I think once that period is over, I think for the next 8-9 months, I think the situation is pretty clear. So any short-term measure like this, which helps to protect their liquidity, because we see that probably the hemorrhaging on public deposits was hurting it, it would be helpful. So we look forward to the fact that the company will continue to maintain its repayment schedule for the next couple of months.
All right. What's the risk scenario as you see it, as we were just discussing?
No, I think that, part of the thing is that this is important that this crisis is not allowed to become a systemic crisis. So I think in that sense, from a timing perspective, with the election results due tomorrow and with hopefully a strong government in place, there will be some actions taken in terms of creating a liquidity window for these housing finance companies and all of that, which could also help tide over. So I think that in the next week or 10 days, we could see. I think part of the reason the government did not act was the impending election and the fact that any action could be perceived opposite or being exploited by the opposition. So I think that right from the ILFS crisis, I think there's not been that much of a government intervention to prevent this from becoming systemic. And ILFS actually led to a systemic liquidity. So I think now we can hopefully see some strong measures from the government and the RBI. Though RBI has clarified that they will not create a separate window, but I think the government is probably would be interested. And we are hopeful that, because otherwise this was a sound company a few months ago, right? It was running its business very well. There was no issues. There were a lot of equity investors interested in it. We were talking about stake sales and all of that. So I think that will ultimately happen. But I think this temporary liquidity thing, I think there needs to be a more strong government action to permit some kind of liquidity, and we are hopeful that that will happen. So that's one thing. Otherwise, in terms of this company itself, like I said earlier in my earlier reply, I think the crisis is really over the ultra short term, like Sandeep said. And once they cross this quarter, next quarter, like September quarter, I think that situation will be much more stable. And companies also not been selling some portion of its books, like the corporate loan book and long-term housing loans. So that is keeping for the end because it wants to get a good valuation. So there is still enough juice left for it to see through, but there's an extreme short-term crisis situation which needs to be tided over. So I think we remain hopeful that something will happen.
All right, gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us this morning.